Hey everyone, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great and following the 3 H's of the channel. In this video, it's all about the state of Montana. So, if that sounds like something you're interested in, pull up a stump with me and let's get into it. Thank you for watching. I was 18 when this story took place. It was the winter of 2015. It's not super long and not particularly scary, although I sure was terrified when it happened. It was on a logging road south of Swan Lake, Montana, sort of near Beaver Creek, I believe. There was a decent amount of snow on the ground. I was visiting home, Swan Lake, Montana, for a couple days, and my little sister, 17 at the time, wanted to go for a drive and listen to music. So we drive for a good 20 minutes away and find this back road and pull off a good distance from the main road so nobody could see us. It was pitch black out and in the winter, so it's dead silent and it's eerie, especially out in the boonies like this at night. I left my headlights on because I had this creepy feeling like we were being watched, but I just figured it was deer or something. I'd seen a moose on that road before, so I knew it was busy. My sister and I were having a conversation when I looked out into the trees, and I swear I see this emaciated, pale, white, humanoid type thing, just barely trying to hide behind a tree. It was still in the darkness beyond my headlights, so it kind of melted into the shadows. I stared at it for a long time. My sister was involved with something that she was talking about, so she was oblivious to my change in mood. I couldn't take my eyes off it. It had this misshaped head that was too big for its thin body, and its eyes were two large, black, unblinking marbles. It didn't move or do anything, so I kind of told myself that it was just something I was seeing in the shadows. It was just beyond the light, enough that I could write it off that easily, I guess. I went back to talking with my sister for a while and decided to see if I could still see the shape of the creature in the shadows, and the next time I looked up, it was closer, now just at the edge of the light. I felt so scared that my eyes filled with tears. It was sort of hunched to its right side, and was standing with a rounded back with its bony, weird hands in a claw shape. I had pulled into the beginning of a single-lane road that was plowed 10 feet in. There was no room for me to turn around, so I had to back out. I made the terrible mistake of just gunning it backwards. Every time I kept looking back, it was closer and closer. I ripped the plastic covering off the driver's side mirror, almost hitting a tree in my rush. I hate to say I left it there. I was too scared to stop and pick it up. Sorry, Mother Nature. My sister never saw the thing. She was super confused about why I randomly got so quiet and then booked it out of there. We drove for a while longer, but I didn't pull off anywhere. I still felt really creeped out. It took me a while to get comfortable going out into the woods alone or driving down back roads alone at night again. I definitely still have no clue what it was. It wasn't some confused hiker wandering around naked, but it had the upright body of a person. It looked like those Dover Demon sketches, but I was between Swan Lake and Sealy Lake, Montana, and it was white and ashen. As far as stories go, I've got a few. There was one evening, I want to say in 2010, 2 friends and myself often went gopher hunting in northern Montana, hill country area. We'd bring 22s onto a guy's land that we knew in the hills near Havre. This one day we came after school about 5 p.m., a little later than normal, but whatever, right? Well, that's what we thought until about 7 p.m. when we were starting to talk about heading back before we lost sunlight. We were about 2 miles away from the truck when we heard a gut-wrenching scream coming from the other side of a large hill to the right of us. None of us could tell what the hell it was except the res kid with us. He was a Blackfoot, and he told us it was a skinwalker. I suggested that we take the direct way back and leave our guns loaded. We hurried along this ditch-like path through the hills. The path itself was a little longer, but it was easy to run through if we had to run. I packed a little snub-nosed .38 for cougars, but tonight it was my skinwalker piece. As we walked back at a hurried pace, I kept my eyes glued to the ridges of the path. An hour passed, and just as we were about to calm down, I see a human-shaped head with a grayish color to it, peeking over a ridge 50 feet from the path. I go to aim my revolver and point the flashlight at it, and in that split second, it disappeared. I tell the guys to watch the sides of the path with the rifles. They were .22s, but it's all we had. It was at the last half mile, so we ran, occasionally hearing it screaming to the side of us. We could see it running through the trees near us in flashes, but I think it only didn't attack us because we stuck together. They tend to target people who are by themselves. Tired and coughing as we got back to the truck, I saw it one more time, 20 feet away, as I was closing the door, and I shot at it with my pistol. After that, we never hunted in the evening again, only in the daytime. I started a new job in an old building with a cool coworker. He's a stoner dude who's really into the paranormal and tells me that this building is haunted. I ask how he knows. He proceeds to tell me he's very sensitive to spirits and shit because he was possessed in high school. I'm going to tell his story from his perspective. When I was 17 in high school, I was a choir boy. I was on a trip to Montana. I can't remember where. We were staying at some really run-down style motel for the night. The guys are separated from the girls. I'm with 2 guys I know and 1 other dude. Instantly, we all notice the same thing. There's child-sized ash handprints on the ceiling. We notice that any time we stand under the handprints, it gets very hot, which is very weird because everywhere else in this hotel room is cold as hell. My close friend wants to mess around and pulls out, no shit, a Ouija board. Everyone but me chickens out. I put my hands on the board, skeptical as hell, and mocking the whole thing. He says, if there are any spirits in this room, make yourself known. 5 minutes of dead silence pass, and he repeats himself, if there are any spirits in this room, make your presence known. Same deal, no reply. I take both hands off of the board. This was a bad idea. I instantly feel strange, hot, and sweaty, with a raging headache. I put my hands back on the board and start to feel better. I figure it's just my nerves. I'll never know why I did this, but for some reason I looked up from the board and said that if there were any spirits in that building, then they could use my body as a vessel. A wave of heat hits me hard. I black out. I wake up and see the clock. I was out for 45 minutes. I think, what the hell? 2 guy friends are on the bed watching TV, obviously avoiding eye contact, and nervous as hell. My close friend is across from me, crying really hard. In the 10 years I've known this kid, I've never seen him cry once. I ask, what happened? Are you okay? He proceeds to tell me that during my blackout, I screamed and shook for a while. I also eventually said to him in a low, raspy voice that it was his fault that his friend drowned. He's never told anybody that he had a friend who drowned. We don't talk about this for a while. Things are okay for about 2 months. So 2 months later, everything's been calm, and I've barely thought about the experience ever again. I was living in a nice 2-floor house with my parents. They were very Mormon, and my brother. So me and him were playing Halo and getting stoned one day. I start to get that really hot feeling again. I look over to my bro, and standing over him is a creepy 7-foot tall old man. This thing has sunken eyes, pale skin, and about 3 teeth, smiling like the Joker at me. He's wearing a pair of dark jeans, black work boots, and a tucked-in dark blue dress shirt, and this weird black Men in Black style fedora. My only thoughts are, what the hell? What the hell? I jump back in my chair for a bit, but I'm too awestruck to make a noise. My brother says, "Man, what's going on?" Not even noticing. I say, "Dude, you see him, right?" My brother says, "Don't even F with me like that. I'm not stupid." The old man vanishes into thin air. I was pretty freaked out, but I chalk it up to that I was just high and hallucinating, not enough sleep. I try to forget about the incident. After this happens though, creepy shit starts going on in the house constantly. Doors begin to close by themselves, noises only I can hear late at night, lamps and lights turning back on after I've turned them off, stuff like that. But what really freaks me out is that it feels like I'm seeing this old man everywhere. I would be walking around in public after school just hanging out, and I'd see him at the corner of my eye. I would only ever see him in the same 2 outfits, either the first one I described or a long black creepy trench coat. This goes on for a while, progressively getting more and more frequent. I don't tell my parents because they're Mormon and would freak the F out if I told them that I was ever playing around with demons and shit. One night, I get up to go to the bathroom and I see a red light coming from under my brother's door. I hear him talking to someone for a little while before I hear a low guttural voice respond. The voice seems to be speaking in Latin. I take notes of it on my phone. I'm not doing that. He's my brother. I was really freaked out. I go back to my room and don't sleep. I look up the Latin words in the morning. The demon said, "Bring death upon him." My brother says that he slept all night and didn't even have a dream related to what I mentioned. Finally, after a few weeks of this going on, my parents are out of town, leaving me and my brother home alone for a whole week. Shit starts to get really bad. I decide to tell my brother about it. He's super understanding, and he gets why I've been acting weird. We decide to do something about it. We do a little bit more research into demonology. I look up the description of the old man that's been following me, and the closest thing I could find was a demon whose name I can't remember. This thing is supposed to be super powerful and evil as all hell. To cut it short, me and my brother ended up getting into contact with a Catholic priest who blessed my house in the traditional way. I figured it was the wise way to go. The Catholics usually have the best methods on getting rid of these things. The entire time we do this, I can feel the presence getting angry. The temperature in the house is rising, and I'm feeling terrible. We complete the blessing, and everything gets quiet. Suddenly, my back is burning and stinging. My brother lifts my shirt. There's 3 huge, distinct, bloody cuts down my back. After the priest leaves, everything returns to normal. My parents return. I never tell them about any of this. Nothing else happens. It was finally over. The guy telling me this story was a little nervous the whole time, but I guess after all of this, he became super sensitive to spirits and is super into paranormal stuff now. Anyway, that's it. So this next one was sent in by Big Bird, so I hope I can do your story justice. When I was a kid, my brother and cousin and I were wandering in the hills. We came upon an area that felt like the rest of the land, but we noticed a cave on the hillside. My cousin and I checked it out even after my brother's protests. There were small footprints and what looked like miniature horse hoof tracks going into it. I remember we even found droppings that looked like horse manure, but it was different at the back of the cave. The cave sort of domed out and had a dirt floor. but it was like it was a stable, but there was nowhere to go. There were tracks going in, but none out. After the cave, we continued our wanderings, and we came across this spot that looked like the highway, like a familiar spot that we thought we knew on the way toward town. Knowing this, it was far for us considering how young we were. But as we contemplated going further or turning back, we noticed that there was no traffic, and it was oddly quiet. Not only that, there was no sound at all, no sound of jake brakes, not even the sound of wildlife. So we turned back, past the cave, and went toward home. But then something happened. We somehow got lost, despite being in this area many times. We even ended up coming back to the cave area, despite walking in a straight line. I got scared after a while, but we made a little fire and roasted marshmallows and drank water to calm down. We were all worried, but I think me freaking out and being the youngest made them all keep composure long enough until we could make it home. During that time in the loop, which is what I felt like it was, the sun stayed in the same spot in the sky. There wasn't any wind that I can recall. However, after we stopped to collect ourselves, we drank our water, and I poured some out as an offering. They laughed at me for thinking that marshmallows and water would be a good enough offering for the spirits. I don't know if we left those or not, but it seemed right, and after that, everything came back. We could hear the road again, and everything else. Gathering our bearings, we sat home, walking in the same direction that we always had been, in the same direction that we kept coming back full circle. So it was scary, but we said we'd try it again. We went through the same little thick of trees once again, and as we were making it through, things began to look familiar again. Getting excited, we sort of ran, but stopped ourselves, just so it wasn't being disrespectful, and not to show fear. As we trekked along, the sound of semis echoing through the hills got stronger, and we were able to pinpoint exactly where we were. We came out on a hill that was far off, looking down west on our community. I remember the sun was still out. I wanted to go right down and straight home, but they wanted to go around on top toward this coulee where we were originally going to explore that day. Recharged from seeing home, we went on, and quickly, I remember I didn't care to explore, more of just wanted to walk through because we were out of water. When we came out the draw and into the field, home was closer, and I was anxious to get there, but my cousin stopped us, saying not to mention what happened or the cave to anyone. I think we even picked cedar and smudged ourselves off. At the time, we all noticed that it was now dark, like the sky was painted bluish purple and oranges and yellow hues from the setting sun. But it wasn't like that just 10 minutes before when we were looking down on our community. It was a weird chilling feeling, like maybe we weren't actually home yet at all, or those spirits were still playing a trick on us. So we called our names because that is something we were always told to do when wandering in the hills. So we did, and we walked into our neighborhood. About a week later, we were going back out into the hills, but we all looked at each other. Nothing was said about it. We just knew that we weren't going to go in that area or near it again. Now, I grew up in this area my whole life, and that means those hills as well. This is years later, so I was out on my own. I had a few of my dogs, a pint of whiskey, some pills, and a lot of weed. I planned to go out for a day in the hills with some of my friends, and we'd have fun on my day off. Something we talked about doing a few days prior, but on the day, they were too hungover from the night before, and the others didn't want to go because it was warmer than expected. I tried to convince some of them, but they wouldn't budge. They just said, "We can do all that stuff here at my friend's house," but I didn't want to, for a few reasons. First, we had planned a day out, since I was working a lot and holding 5 jobs down that summer. And this is in rural Montana, so it's easy for an eager guy to get work when willing. It also helped that my part-time job was a fill-in at the local casino, and my priority was a wildland firefighter. The other one was one of my own gigs as a handyman contractor, a ranch hand, and sometimes a bartender on my lazy Sundays. And the other reason was that they didn't share their drinks when I stopped by the night before, when they were talking about how fun our day in the hills was going to be. And lastly, one of the guys that stayed at my friend's house was a worthless person, a dumb-as-hell wannabe rapper that just mooched off everyone, and he always liked to fight with me, ever since we were kids. He was a good friend of mine, and then one day he just started fighting me and challenging me after he met my cousin. I think maybe it's because he thought he was cool, so I just went out alone. First, I just hiked up some good steep hills to get the blood pumping for the goodies, and then stopped for refreshments. I was just out wandering with my dogs under a bright sunny day, thinking it must suck for my friends, because it was nice and cool with the wind and all the shaded areas that I was trekking. I was feeling good from my cocktail of whiskey and pills, smoking my joints. I walked about 2 to 3 miles, back and forth, up and down the hills in my area, finding myself up on a high point with a nice ledge to perch on. I sat there, looking out on the landscape. I was thinking about some jobs that I wanted to do, and I was clearing my schedule for them. And then I thought, why am I thinking about work? I'm out here to get away from all that. So I just stopped thinking, and just sat there, not a sense in my head, when I realized something, how quiet it was. The wind had died down, and I couldn't hear the highway anymore. I didn't even hear my dogs panting, or them doing dog things. I was laying back with my eyes closed, so I sat up to look around, and still I could hear nothing. I got up to look around and called for my dogs. I didn't really get worried yet. I was more thinking, whoa, this is crazy. It just gets like this sometimes out here, but not hearing my dogs bark when I would call for them was definitely odd. After a minute or two, I just left it, and figured if they got tired or thirsty, they might have made off for home and will wander back out if or when they please. They are res dogs after all. And when left to their own devices, they were out in the hills a lot. You were able to see their paths going up the hill behind my house. I was just unbothered when most people would probably freak out. Having everything just go quiet and finding yourself more alone than you already thought you were. The sounds of nature and the highway being gone was odd. As I walked down the hill, it brought back this memory. I was making my way down the hill toward a back road that led to my neighborhood when my dog popped out from the other side of it, looking like she had just had herself a squirrel or something. I asked her where the others were. She just looked back where she came, so I figured I haven't been down this way in a long time, but I knew it well, hence me thinking that they were having a buffet at a huge squirrel town. There was a few trees whose bases were buried with years of pine cones piled up with networks of holes in them as their stores, and the trees in that spot all showing signs of constant traffic. When you're there, and they're feeling lively, they'll throw pine cones at you, or sticks. Some of them even feel brave enough to run at you and rip at your pants. That's how much they want to show you that this place is their spot. On our way down, I told my dog to take me to the others, and she did. As we go, I noticed a lot of the places flashed back to the time loop period. It was so vivid that I could remember that morning running through that area and it being brand new to me. As she led me, I was thinking, I wonder if my brothers remember this. Anywho, we found the others. They found the spring near our rodeo grounds, and I realized that this is why they would often look like they did when they came back from the hills. It was hot, and had been a couple hours. I thought that I would get some water at the trough that they have out there. After getting my fill, I got it in me that I really wanted to find that place. I really wanted to go back to the cave again, and also to find that Twilight Area highway. I figured I have my dogs, so if anything happens, and I don't get out. Maybe one might, and someone can trace it back to me. So I made my peace, and I fought back the fear of those memories. After some time, I came upon the spot with the trees. They were taller now, but I knew going through them I'd find that clearing, and on the other side of it, I would see that opening with the draw to the left, and straight through the opening was another natural opening that went on toward the right, and sure as shit, when I came through that thick of trees, I saw it. Everything came back tenfold. Even worse, I was by myself and with my dogs, but no one knew. I just hoped that my loved ones wouldn't look too long if I didn't come back. As much as memory serves me well and instinct said to turn back, I walked on after making sure that one of my dogs were close. Passing the opening and rounding the hill down the draw was everything I remembered. I stayed out in the middle in the open. I rounded till I could see where it was. I could see the old path and where it went. I was puzzled. You can see the path and the yellowing of the area where the cave was. Past it was reddish brown, and there were bushes, just the normal stuff like the rest of the area. But where this cave was supposed to be, there was nothing. It looked just like a game trail where animals would go to graze on the hillsides. If anyone knows what I'm talking about, they'll get it, but I was sort of mad. I made it all the way here, and nothing. I even walked up the path to the spot that I knew. It felt weird. It really did feel like I was being watched from the hill across from me. But mostly, I made sure I didn't mix up the memory and what I was actually feeling. But what made me confirm it all was that my dogs did not follow me up that path, and my girl Fluffy, who was the oldest one at the time, made those whiny noises out of concern before I went up to it. And all that time, she just stayed off near that opening, down by the start of the path. The others just roamed about, but they all visibly stayed clear of that area. Wouldn't even come when I called them. They just looked at me as they drew near but kept their distance. After I went down the draw toward that highway, I remembered it wasn't far from the cave, so I figured it wouldn't be too long until I came to the narrow spot where it closed in with trees and the natural drainage area that dropped down to the ditch that showed the highway. After the cave not being there, I marched right on through. It was just like I remember, but at the point of the drainage, there was no barbed wire fence and no highway. One dog just felt like we were on our way from that spot and went about his business. At the drain, he stopped to look back at me, and I asked what he could see. If you haven't realized by now, I talk to my dogs like I do anyone, but he was like, come on. In that area, it was going out to another clearing and out to more wilderness. So I went and circled that area. Nothing. So I went back toward the cave, and it was just as I saw, but my dogs steered clear of that area. Anywhere else, they were all over the place. But that spot, it was like you could even see the bugs stay away from it. It was like a line drawn on a piece of paper, but this was no line that I could see. Two of them I watched. One always followed right after the other with their nose to the ground, and they'd follow that line, and after they got past it, they would continue on exploring. The game trails that I mentioned were more distinguishable the second time through, and I noticed that their grazing paths were starting about the same distance away from where my dogs walked. I walked up closer, directly below the cave, perpendicular from the path, and seeing that you can clearly see where animals grazed and didn't. There wasn't any cow patties in that area. Above it on the hill was too steep, so there wouldn't be many signs there. Then I realized the path stayed there because of erosion, and if they still used that cave. But it was south-facing in the sun and in the open, so it would make sense that it would still have signs of being there. But the cave itself was where it looked like it was dug out long ago, and time did its thing. There was brush right near it, but it was old and dried out at this time. Then I just gave up and made my way back home, Before leaving the first clearing with the thicket of trees, I lit a joint and laid it on the ground as an offering. It was all I had left. It's from nature, and from nature it returned. I said a prayer and made it through after a bit back home. And after having a conversation with Big Bird, he told me a small side story, so here that is as well. One time, long ago, our parents had some family over. They were having a good time. It didn't matter because us kids got to go all have a sleepover a few houses over at my aunt's. Not long before midnight or so, my mom and aunt came over and we heard shouting. Think something had gone bad. We worried, but they just came in and checked on us, and my mom took us home. We later learned that the front door swung open and a little green man ran up the stairs. They didn't know which room it went into, but it never left. That freaked us out. Then, 5 or so years later, around 2004, I came home late after football practice, and I saw that nobody was home. When I got inside, I had to use the bathroom. As I go downstairs, the upper balcony started just as you land in the lower portion. As I got to the bathroom, right as you make it down, I heard stomping above me. Thinking that it was my brother trying to scare me, I told him to knock it off, or I will tell Dad, and I went to do my thing. However, the stomping continued to follow me. I just yelled that it wasn't working, and once I perched atop the porcelain throne, I heard a louder stomp just as I sat down. And then it dawned on me, the upstairs bedroom was full of storage because it kept clogging up. That's when I went quiet and hurried up. I still wanted to believe that it was my brother. I was yelling out to him to knock this shit off. I walked up just like a normal person onto the main floor, and as I looked, I heard scuttling, but I didn't see anything. I just had to check it out, even though my body was buzzing with electricity. Thankfully, I had the foresight to open the front door before walking up the stairs. I saw that our bed's open, so I felt like it was just my brother, and I said again to knock it off. But the feeling never left. So I make it to the top, just enough to peek around the banister and looking into our room. You can only see a small bit, because the rest open right out after the door. I just said knock it off, or else, when everything in me was like a shock or a jolt, and I heard little stampering of fast-moving feet, not like the Chucky doll, but something similar, sort of like how fast Stewie's from Family Guy, his foot animation, something like that. That's somewhat of how it sounded. When from around the corner, back toward the wall to the front of the house, a dark shadow blurred into view. It just stood there, honestly menacingly, like it had this creepy feeling you got from it. More like, I know you aren't scared, but I've got you now. That kind of feeling. I could see its orangish or yellow-red glowing eyes, like it was making itself look like it was breathing. I looked at it in disbelief, like, no, this isn't real. I looked it up and down. It was less than 3 feet tall. It had a gaunt stance and its arms were out like a gunslinger. And then I looked back at its eyes. I was blinking to wake up or something. It stopped moving, and then moved toward me really fast. I just turned and leapt. It wasn't that far really. It was like 8 feet down, and I turned back just as it came into view and into the light. It was still dark, almost like a shadow in the night, but it had a dark green glow to it. No real facial features, but almost telepathically you can feel or hear what it wanted you to think. I can still hear its feet shuddering to this day. But I just bolted for the door. This time, I jumped a lot farther than I ever thought I could jump, but it was from the door jamb, about 13 feet to across the grass, where the cement ends off from the sidewalk. I honestly screamed, not like a girl, but like that yelp that guys make as I jumped. I rolled as I landed and looked back, and there it was, under that light, still inside the house, just looking at me. I was crying at this point. I told it to leave, but it just gave me a mocking look. I shouted a bit more, and then looked for my dogs. but they weren't around for some reason. They were there when I got home, but it didn't budge. I was honestly more scared of what my parents would think if I left the front door wide open with no one else home that late at night in the cold October night sky. So, above all good reasoning, when I should just run to my aunt's next door for help, I stepped forward toward the door. I didn't think it was expecting that at all, especially while crying and tears coming down my face. I swallowed hard and slowly walked up the handful of stairs. By then, it doubled down to intimidate me, and in a blur, it was right by the door handle. It was only a few feet that it had to move, but it was like a blink, but I didn't blink. It moved almost like a glitch, but not. It was just there, a bit closer. I can't explain it more than it blurred when it moved. I don't know if anyone else has ever been face to face with one of these in the light and seen it move, but I have. I've heard of others seeing them. Also, my cousin fought one in my grandparents' house once when it tried to take her baby when it was just a few months old. So I know people have seen them. I just never heard of anyone seeing them in the full light, but that's what I saw. Think of how in the movie The Matrix, those agents move in on Neo, or when they fight. It was sort of like that, but in real life, without the slow motion. It was just blurred. It's just there, and then in an instant, it's a few feet closer, without looking like it's really moved its body to do so. I flinched a bit, but more from a bullying standpoint than when I got mad. I told it again to leave, in a sobbing, hoarse voice. I was still a couple feet from the door jamb, but that's when I was just going to lunge for the doorknob and shut it. But as I moved, the door just slammed shut without that thing moving. I just cried out again and bolted, not knowing where I was going, just that my feet were moving. I ran, looking toward my aunt's house, making it to the door, bawling my head off. My cousin was the only one home, and she let me in. She was shook up from wondering why I was freaking out like that. She was asking a bunch of questions I don't remember at all, to be honest. I know she thought that somebody was bullying me or beat me up, but I was just asking for my parents, and I asked if she had seen her. She just took me in as all this was going on, rushing for the phone and into the kitchen. She came back with a cup of water and told me to calm down. She called my mom and tried relaying what I'm sure was hard to explain. Just someone chased me out of the house, and I was crying. After a while and some popcorn, she asked what happened. I said, a little green man chased me out of the house. She got up and said she would smudge me off, and if I left, to leave the door open. It was funny, because I remember that she was home alone in the dark watching a scary movie, and that's what I was calming down to. I don't know. After seeing what I've seen, somehow scary movies made it easier. I loved them and all that, but once Insidious came out, that was way too real for my liking, and it brought back too many horrible memories that I don't much like those movies. That captured something incredibly real in those ones. So thank you to Big Bird for sending in those stories from his res in Montana. So those encounters were pretty wild, weren't they? If one in particular stuck out to you, let me know which one it was down in the comments. And if you would like to send one into the channel, there's an email in the description below that you can send them to if you'd like to. Also in the description is a PayPal and a Patreon if you would like to donate to the channel that way, as well as super thanks and memberships here on YouTube. And with all of that, I hope you enjoyed the videos this week, and if you did, then please feel free to like and subscribe and share the video and comment and everything else. So I hope you all had a good week, and let's hope that next week is just a little bit better. So, thank you for pulling up a stump, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.